G'day to all my friends and family, and welcome to this episode of Jim's 5am Club. It's Sunday afternoon, and I've got a little bit of time now to go through and deliver another vlog on a book and to continue the tradition of Jim's 5am Club, where we examine, look through, learn from, and try and implement the many lessons that we gain from OPE, other people's experiences. I guess we've learnt over the years that you can sit and spend your whole lifetime trying to reinvent the wheel, and you may do it and you may not do it. But the interesting thing and the most productive thing to do is to understand that everything that will trouble you in your lifetime, every thought that you've had, every thought that anybody has already been thought about before and solved before as well. So you can tap into the wisdom of the past, other people's experiences, and one really powerful and productive way of tapping into those past experiences is by accessing OPE, other people's experiences, via books, via documentaries, where people have actually sat down, delved deep into their spirit, and some very deep thinking to come up with documentation of their lessons, their many lessons learned, and pass them on to others. So there are millions and millions of books in the world where people have taken personal leadership and expressed, as I said before, their inner soul, their deep thinking, and presented many lessons, opportunities for us to use them as stepping stones so that we can get through our lives without having to reinvent each of these solutions along the way, because by reinventing solutions you need to go through some trial and error. So we don't want to actually have to go through that hardship every single day of our lives, when we can basically learn from other people's successes, and more importantly and more productively for us, learn from their failures as well. It costs you nothing to learn from other people, I guess, is one of the key lessons. So today what I'd like to do is I'd like to go through a book summary entitled Personal Development for Smart People, written by an author named Steve Pavlina. And Steve, in his book, references the great Steve Covey. I remember going to Stephen Covey's seminar, I think it was at the Opera House back in the early 90s, or may have been in the 80s actually, I'm not quite sure, I can't quite remember. But it was one of those seminars that I went to. I paid for it out of my own pocket. I didn't expect my employer to invest in my growth and development. I remember paying $150 or something like that back then, which was a significant amount of money for a one-day seminar. I think Stephen spoke for a few hours, not too many hours, but I was able to gain a lot from that session. It was a great session indeed. And the author here talks about the fact that Steve Covey referenced a lot during his seminars, and actually wrote a book entitled Principle-Centered Leadership. And what the author here says is that we all need to be able to have a set of core principles, a set of core values to act as a strong foundation for the conscious pursuit of growth and development, because it's only through personal growth and development, that continued growth and development, that we can actually feel fulfilled in our lives. And you just can't grow and develop and then just call it quits. At the recent Anthony Robbins seminar that I went to, we learned that today's 8s are tomorrow's 6s. So we continually need to grow and develop, bend and stretch, improve, because we're living in an ever-changing world. One thing for sure and for certain is that times are changing, and they're changing very, very dramatically and very, very rapidly. So we need to be on guard, we need to be ready, and we need to leverage that change, because with change also comes tremendous opportunity for those who are positioned to take advantage of that change. Because when things are changing, nobody quite knows where they're going. But Anthony Robbins talked about the fact that if you understand patterns, everything happens in a pattern, a recurring pattern that has happened time and time and time again over time, over history. So the people who are best at understanding, identifying and predicting certain patterns are the ones who are going to be able to capture the most opportunity in the future, because a lot of other people will be sitting on their hands, worried, sick, and suffering fear, uncertainty and doubt, and all the results and all the procrastination that come from not quite being certain about where things are going. So what we're saying here is that if you're able to understand patterns and to be flexible, having strong goals, of course, but varying your approach, knowing very well that if it doesn't succeed the first time, you need to change your approach, and every time you change your approach, you may get closer and closer to your goal. And to also understand, this is very, very important as well, to understand that everybody has a certain fate, and not everything is going to happen for you, just like not everything I want is going to happen for me. Just because it worked for my parents doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work for me. Just because it didn't work for my parents doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to work for me. But we all need to test our fate. God wants us to challenge ourselves and to test us, tests our belief, tests our trust, and see whether or not we have what it takes in order to get what is good for our soul and what is good for us, for our growth and development. So we're invited to go for it, and to understand that you may not get it the first time, you may not get it the second time, you may not ever get it, but to know that it's God's will as to whether or not you get it or you don't get it, but also that you need to work to try and get what you need to get, and it's not just going to fall into your lap without any effort on your behalf. It may fall into your lap, but chances are, it's not going to happen that way. So you need to work it, and you need to be active, you need to be productive, you need to be trusting, and you need to do things that are God-pleasing, to love God with all your heart, mind and soul, as well as loving your neighbour as you love yourself. And the important message here is that you need to love yourself first in order to be able to love and to express love to other people. So Steve Pavlina in this book talks about these principles, and the principles are probably about a dozen or so. Principles of truth, love, power, oneness, authority, courage, intelligence. And some people call them principles, other people call them virtues. The Greeks call them arates. But it's these things that we need to be constantly honing, constantly shaping in order to get and to better ourselves so that we can continue to grow and become the person who we're meant to become. The author here also goes on to say something which is pretty powerful and interesting. I didn't quite appreciate this as much when I was reading the book summary, but I appreciate it a lot more now, where he says that everyone seems to be attracted to people who consistently demonstrate truth, love, and power. It seems to be a universal attractor. So if you were to focus on a few things in your life, then the three things that this author suggests as being key to one's growth and development is to focus on love, truth, and the power that comes from being, what's the word I'm looking for? It'll come to me shortly. But the power that comes from one who is confident and can see the way forward by the confidence that comes out of it. The author here also says something which is very, very interesting as well, that a lot of people say that you'll believe it if you see it, but the author here says what's more important to understand is that when you see it, when you first see it, when you're first able to visualize it and have clarity, that's when you'll be able to believe it. The author then goes on to talk about relationships, and once again it's all very interesting, and he says your relationships have a big influence on your self-development, and we mustn't underestimate this. Our relationships have a massive influence on our self-development, and we are called to surround ourselves with peers who are going to challenge us and not just comfort us. When people comfort us, it doesn't necessarily help us to grow and develop. It gives us a false sense of security. So the author here says that a peer group is different from a friend group and a family group. Friends and family are the people who are there to support you. But a peer group has a very, very important task to do, and their job is to push you, to cajole you, to bend you, to stretch you, to get you to be a bigger, better version of yourself. So we need to be very, very selective with who we hang out with, who we listen to, what we read, and what we allow into our minds, and to have a guard at our mind, because an open mind, even though people talk about the importance of being open-minded, an open mind without a guard at the doors is very risky. And why it is risky is that an open mind has the risk of becoming a rubbish tip for all the garbage that other people want to fill into your head. So we need to be mindful. We need to be guarded. We need to be measured with what we allow into our minds. And Anthony Robbins talked about the reticular activating system and how it is programmed so that at both the conscious and the subconscious level, we can focus on our goals and work towards manifesting those outcomes magically. But we do get primed by ourselves and by other people, and there's constant stacking of priming elements that each of us face that can be both empowering or disempowering. So we need to be selective with what we prime our reticular activating system with, our mind with, our brain with, because what we think about, what we obsess over, is going to be who we become. Where focus goes, energy flows. And what we don't want to be doing is we don't want to be going backwards, sideways, or being distracted by other people's contributions, well-meaning contributions. I'm not saying that they're not well-meaning contributions, but we need to be careful with what we take in, because it can distract us and lead us off course. It's like a rip. It's like a current which can take you off course, and getting back on course requires effort on our behalf, I guess is one way of putting it. The author also says that we need to understand that all relationships, and this is a deep point, all relationships are temporary. The only permanent relationship that we can truly enjoy is that with God, the personal relationship that we have with Jesus. All other relationships, every single other relationship is temporary. Only God is the truth. Only God is permanent. You know, our parents, our partners, our children, uncles, aunts, grandparents, friends, work peers, everybody who will ever come into contact with in our lives, every single person that we will have a relationship with in our lives, at some point will perish, and that relationship will cease. So this is where it's important to understand that the relationships that we enjoy in our lives are temporary, and to respect those relationships and respect those people, and to understand that those relationships are there to serve us in many ways. It's up to us to identify how we can use those relationships for our growth and development. The author also goes on to say that it's probably a good idea, where possible, for somebody to focus on setting up their own business rather than being an employee of somebody else, because it's more secure in the long term to have your own business, to be working in your own business than for working for somebody else. And I myself can vouch for that. I don't own a business. I've worked for a number of the biggest and best companies in the world. But having said that, I've also had 5 redundancies where my job has been made redundant and I've had to try and reinvent myself and find employment elsewhere. And whenever you're finding work elsewhere, you're starting from scratch. Fair enough, you've got experience, you've got contacts, but I guess what I've learnt over time is that accounts for nothing. So you're basically starting from scratch and you've got to reinvent yourself and kickstart your life again. And the author here also goes on to say something interesting, that how much you get paid per hour is a reflection of the social value of the work that you perform. So we need to try and find work that creates significant social value in order to increase the remuneration that we get for what we do. The author then goes on to talk about how to change oneself, how to break habits. And he says that one thing you can do is that you can consult your past, present, or future self about any matter. At the recent Anthony Robbins seminar that I attended, we did a thing called a Dickens process, where we look at where we are now or where we've been in the past, and then what we try and do is we try and identify, understand and visualize the first, second and third level consequences of the many decisions that we've made throughout our lives. And then what you do is you project forward 5, 10, 20, 30 years and ask yourself the question, what would you be saying to yourself? How would you feel when you look back over your life at the decisions that you consistently made and were being put in a position where you could experience the pleasure or the pain of not changing and continuing to do the things that you were doing? And to hear the wailing and the screaming, the bone-chilling screams of people who were visualizing and feeling the intense pain and suffering by consulting their future self and looking back at not making decisions and just continuing to live life at a lower standard and accepting life in terms of what it was for them without intentionally making changes and making decisions that were going to serve them, to me was very, very powerful. The other thing that's really, really powerful is that by consulting your past, present or future self, you can have a conversation, an intimate conversation. You can also change your past, your present and your future by asking some very, very detailed and good type of questions. So a lot of people think that they've had a bad childhood, but their childhood isn't all that bad, because most people have a great childhood. Even people who think that they haven't had a great childhood, it's just that they're focused on one or two events in that childhood that overwhelms all the positives. They say that in our lives, for every negative we have, we need 10 positives to neutralize it and to get us to feel okay about ourselves. So it's not one for one. It's not one negative is swapped out and neutralized by one positive. It's 10 positives are needed to eliminate and balance out one negative. Pretty crazy, isn't it? So once again, it's up to each and every one of us. We can relive the past. We can consult our past self and convince ourselves that all of those things that we thought were bad aren't all that bad after all. It's just that we're focused on the negative because we were mismatches. Now, there are two types of people in the world that I've learnt. There are people who are matches, who look for the things which are good, look for things that combine and bring things together, the common elements, the common things about people. And there are people who are mismatches, who just look for what is wrong, who just look for what is different, not understanding that we're all different from each other, but we're different for each other. It's not something that's wrong with us if we're different from anybody else. We just need to understand that that's how we are, that's our gift, and we need to find a way to use that gift to complement and supplement the things that are going on around us in our lives. The author talks about the importance of being able to consult your future, past and present self and ensure that everything is congruent and consistent and aligned to your values, your principles, your goals, and more importantly, your actions. We can talk about our goals, we can talk about our values all we want. It means nothing. It's what you do when people aren't looking. That is your character. That is your charaktera, as the Greeks say. And charaktera means an engraved thing. So when you engrave something, it's indelible, it's permanent. It's what makes you you. It's your identity, your charaktera. Then the author here goes on to say, talking about how we swap out, how we change our habits. And he calls it stair-stepping, to change habits. So if you want to reduce your coffee intake, or if you want to stop drinking coffee, yes, you can do it cold turkey. I've done it cold turkey. I stopped drinking coffee 33 years ago when my second daughter was born. For me, it was very, very simple. I rationalised one day when my second daughter was born that when your first daughter or when your first child comes into your life, your whole world changes. Everybody in that relationship gets redefined. My wife becomes a mother. I become a father for the first time. My parents, who didn't have any other children, become grandparents for the first time. Others become uncles and aunts for the first time with that first child that comes into the family. And everybody's redefined in a massive, massive way. But when the second child comes into the world, not saying that second children, third children or other children are not as valuable, but things don't change all that much. So what I decided to do when my second daughter was born, Artemis, I decided to make a change for her. I decided to change something in my life that was a gift to her. So I decided, I could have decided anything, but I decided back then that I would stop drinking coffee. And fair enough, the first couple of weeks, it was hard. I was having throbbing headaches where my mind, my body were playing games with me, were testing me out. But because I made that promise, that solemn promise to my daughter, believe it or not, I kept it. I'm glad I did, because even now when anybody asks me to get me a cup of coffee, my daughter just is proud as punch to say that my dad doesn't drink coffee. So what the author here is saying is that if you can't swap something out and change it cold turkey, what you can do is you can start reducing it. So instead of having 4 coffees a day, you reduce it by 25% and you just drink 3 coffees a day. And then you go from 3 to 2, and then 2 to 1, and then slowly edge it out of your system. You need to do it in a balanced way, a methodical way, so that your body doesn't fight you, because our minds, our bodies are pretty skilled at fighting us. In order to change habits, we also need to be comfortable with being rebellious. We need to rebel against ourselves. We need to rebel against our community, our friends, our family, our past selves. We need to make independent decisions, and we need to break free of a very powerful thing called peer pressure. So we need small rebellions. We need to encourage small rebellions in ourselves and in our children and in those around us, and to know that we are all in different seasons in our lives. We all have seasons, chapters and phases. We've got winter, summer, spring and autumn. Some people could be in a summer at this particular stage of their lives, and others could be in a winter. We need to meet people where they're at and to understand that not everybody is experiencing the same season at the same time. Even ourselves, we may be experiencing different seasons at different stages of our lives, and even if throughout the day, depending on the priming, depending on the stacking of messages that come our way, the trigger stacking that happens by the people around us, by the media, and by events that seem to just happen, to understand that there are things that can distract us and get us off track. But the author here says something very important. As I said before, whilst we need to have a guard to our mind for fear of other people using our brain and our mind as their rubbish tip for all the garbage that they have and that they seem to believe, our heart, on the other hand, is different. We need to release our heart and to use our heart to make a lot more of the decisions that we have to make. Because what happens is our heart is based on emotion, it's based on feeling, but most importantly, it's also based on our subconscious, something that has been programmed, something that is in there, knowing very well that everything that happens throughout the day, throughout our lives, every bit of stimulus that comes through our 5 senses gets loaded, gets stored in our brains. So it's all there, but we can't access it all the time. It goes into our subconscious, and our reticular activating system, as Anthony Robbins reminded us of the other day at the seminar, the UPW seminar. He said that the filter, the reticular activating system, enables us to focus on the things that are important to us, rather than to have everything bubbling to the top. Because if everything in our subconscious was allowed to flow into our conscious, you'd go absolutely crazy. So our heart is tapped into, our soul is tapped into our subconscious, and our subconscious is processing things, is doing things in the background when we're sleeping, when we're on the train, when we're doing other things, distracted. Our subconscious is busy working away, doing the things that are important to us. And that's why we have intuition. That's why we have a thing called a gut feel, because what is happening is that our subconscious is telling us what it has come up with, and yet we fight our intuition because we want to be rational. We want to be able to see it in order to believe it. But it's happening at that subconscious level. It's happening very, very powerfully. And we need to submit, and we need to embrace that capability that we have as humans. It's a God gift to have a subconscious. Of course, the subconscious, just like the conscious, can be manipulated by demons and all of those things, which I won't get into. But we've got to trust our heart, the eye of our heart, wherever we can, because that's where love comes from. That's where truth comes from, and we need to leverage it and use it in a positive and productive way. So the author here encourages us to find the path with your heart. Hard to describe it, hard to understand it, especially in the Western world, where everything is based on being rational, being logical, and doing things in a particular way. So once again, in summary, the author here tells us that we need to try and build alignment, congruence, that becomes the magic glue that keeps good people together. So once again, thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Jim's 5am Club. I just need to be careful that I don't slip down here because it's a bit dusty and a lot of leaves around, and to learn from this OPE that we have available to us. For those who are not aware, I have a YouTube channel named Jim's 5am Club, where I have 1,571, that's right, 1,571 vlogs that I've been able to accumulate over the past 3.5 years, ever since COVID hit. And it's something that I just love doing. It's a library, it's a massive library of content. I don't think you'll be able to find a similar library anywhere in the world. A library where I've got books, life experiences, where I'm able to complement and supplement what other people say with the experiences that I have been able to accumulate in my life. And as we know, learning is the art of attaching the unknown to the known, and the more you know, the more you're capable of knowing, the more you learn, the more you're capable of learning. And to understand that, given that I've done and put together thousands of minutes, thousands of hours of vlogs, I'm able to take those lessons that I've learnt from all of those different authors, all of that OPE, and to add it to the material that other people put together and talk about. So there you go. So once again, get on the channel if you like it, spread the word, and let me know, give me some feedback in terms of how I'm going. But I will continue where possible to add to the content that I've been able to generate and put together, and see how I can leverage this and see how I can make this available to other people to be able to use in their lives as well. So thank you very much. Wishing you all the best, and happy Sunday night to everybody, and a good start to the work week. Yassas, bye for now from Jim on Jim's 5am Club.